On June 1, 2009, an Airbus A330 carrying 228 people vanished over the Atlantic Ocean. No distress call, no survivors. And for nearly 2 years, nobody knew exactly what happened. But when investigators finally recovered the black boxes from the ocean floor, they uncovered one of the most terrifying cockpit recordings in aviation history. This is the story of Air France Flight 447, the plane that fell from the sky. Air France Flight 447 departed Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, late in the evening on May 31, 2009. Its destination was Paris, France. The aircraft was an Airbus A330, one of the most advanced passenger aircraft in the world at the time. On board were 216 passengers and 12 crew members, families, business travelers, tourists, children. To everyone on board, it was supposed to be a routine overnight flight across the Atlantic Ocean. At the controls sat Captain Marc Dubois along with 2 first officers. The weather near departure was normal. The aircraft took off smoothly and climbed into the night sky over South America. For the first several hours, everything appeared routine. Passengers slept quietly in the dark cabin while the aircraft cruised at 38,000 feet above the Atlantic. But far ahead of the aircraft, a dangerous storm system was building. As Flight 447 continued north across the ocean, the crew monitored powerful thunderstorms along their route. Flying through storms over the Atlantic is not unusual. Pilots regularly navigate around dangerous weather using onboard radar systems, and at first the situation did not appear catastrophic. The aircraft slightly adjusted course to avoid the worst weather cells. Lightning flashed outside the cockpit windows. Turbulence increased, but nothing suggested disaster was moments away. Then suddenly, everything changed. At approximately 2:10 a.m., the aircraft's pitot tubes likely became blocked by ice crystals. Pitot tubes are small sensors mounted outside the aircraft that measure airspeed. Without accurate speed readings, the aircraft's computer systems became confused. Almost instantly, autopilot disconnected. Warning alarms filled the cockpit. For the pilots, the situation became chaotic within seconds. One of the pilots reacted by pulling the nose of the aircraft upward. That decision would prove catastrophic. The Airbus began climbing too steeply. Speed rapidly decreased. And within moments, the aircraft entered an aerodynamic stall. A stall does not mean the engines stop working. It means the wings can no longer generate enough lift to keep the aircraft flying normally. The terrifying part was that the pilots did not fully realize the plane was stalling. As the aircraft shook violently in the darkness above the Atlantic, confusion spread through the cockpit. The stall warning activated repeatedly, but the pilots struggled to understand what was happening. At one point, one pilot could be heard saying, "I don't understand what's happening." The aircraft continued climbing and falling erratically through the storm. Passengers in the cabin likely experienced severe turbulence and violent movements. The plane rolled side to side while losing altitude rapidly. Inside the cockpit, stress and panic continued increasing. The pilots attempted multiple control inputs, but instead of lowering the nose to recover from the stall, the aircraft remained pitched upward. Every second made the situation worse. Then the captain returned to the cockpit after taking a scheduled rest break. But by the time he returned, the aircraft was already falling uncontrollably through the night sky. The pilots desperately tried to regain control. Alarms continued sounding. Warning systems repeated the same message over and over again. Stall, stall. Yet the aircraft continued descending. What makes the tragedy of Flight 447 so terrifying is that the plane remained structurally intact almost the entire time. The engines were still functioning. The aircraft itself was still capable of flying, but confusion inside the cockpit prevented recovery. For over 4 minutes, the Airbus A330 fell through the darkness above the Atlantic Ocean. Passengers likely had little understanding of what was happening. The cabin remained dark except for occasional flashes of lightning outside. The aircraft dropped from 38,000 feet toward the ocean below. Then, at approximately 2:14 a.m., Air France Flight 447 slammed into the Atlantic Ocean. The impact killed all 228 people on board instantly, and then the aircraft disappeared. With no survivors and very limited information, investigators faced an enormous challenge. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, and Flight 447 had vanished in one of the deepest parts of the ocean. Search crews from multiple countries began looking for debris. Days later, small pieces of wreckage were discovered floating in the ocean, but the aircraft's main wreckage and black boxes remained missing. Without the black boxes, investigators could not determine exactly what had happened inside the cockpit. The disappearance quickly became one of aviation's greatest mysteries. For nearly 2 years, search teams scanned the ocean floor. The search operation became one of the most difficult and expensive in aviation history. Finally, in 2011, investigators located the wreckage nearly 13,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Soon afterward, they recovered the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder. What investigators heard shocked the aviation world. The recordings revealed that the crash was not caused by terrorism or catastrophic structural failure. Instead, a chain of confusion, stress, icing, and pilot error had brought down one of the world's most advanced airliners. The investigation concluded that temporary icing of the pitot tubes triggered the initial problem, but the aircraft itself remained flyable. The real disaster unfolded inside the cockpit. Investigators discovered the pilots had unintentionally kept the aircraft in a stalled condition for nearly the entire descent. At several moments, recovery may still have been possible, but the confusion of the situation combined with nighttime conditions and conflicting information overwhelmed the crew. The tragedy permanently changed pilot training around the world. Airlines introduced new procedures for high-altitude stall recovery and unreliable airspeed situations. Airbus also updated systems and recommendations following the accident. Even today, Air France Flight 447 remains one of the most chilling aviation disasters in modern history. Not because the aircraft exploded, not because of terrorism, but because a modern airliner, fully intact and still functioning, slowly fell from the sky while the pilots struggled to understand what was happening. It was a tragedy caused by seconds of confusion that became impossible to reverse. 228 lives were lost in the darkness above the Atlantic Ocean. And the story of Flight 447 continues, reminding the aviation world how quickly even small problems can spiral into catastrophe. If you enjoyed this aviation documentary, subscribe to Sky Aviation Files for more real aviation stories every day. And let me know in the comments, what aviation story should we cover next?